comments from the Madison Square Garden rally Sunday about Puerto Rico being, quote, an island of garbage continue to reverberate. In an unusual move, the Trump campaign distanced itself from the comedian who spoke those words.
Kamala Harris wasted no time capitalizing on the gaffe. She dropped this ad.
A floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico.
I will never forget what Donald Trump did. He abandoned the island and offered nothing more than paper towels and insults. Puerto Ricans deserve better. As president, I will always fight for you and your families, and together we can chart a new way forward.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Joining us to discuss the continued fallout is Geraldo Rivera himself. Geraldo, thanks for joining us. Let's get right into it. You said you have reached your breaking point with Donald Trump, and this remark from the comedian is the latest example of why. Talk us through why this joke in particular was so offensive to you.
It was racist, low down and dirty. It was a grievous insult. It was an attack on our heritage, on our ethnicity, on our history. It was insulting and lowbrow, and it really, see, if it were a comedian in a vacuum, let's say you go down to a comedy club and he told that particular joke, there would have been groans and moans in the audience. Maybe it would have been quite as egregious as it was. But to do it before the entire world in a political context, in what was supposed to be Donald Trump's farewell address before the election, to give it that kind of stage was so grievously insulting, so racist, so demeaning that I could not help but express my absolute disdain and dismay at President Trump, because even though he says they did not vet the comedian's jokes, which I find impossible to believe, but even so, to give the they killed other jokes involving the C word addressed at Vice President Harris, other kind of just lowbrow. The whole atmosphere in that rally, in that fabled hall, Madison Square Garden, the whole it stunk. It stunk of racism. It stunk of disdain for the Puerto Rican people, for Latinos generally, and worst of all, it was in sync with, absolutely parallel to everything President Trump has been saying on the campaign trail, with the poisoning the blood of our people remarks about migrants, with saying that Mexican migrants must have murder in their genes, a genetic argument, promising mass deportations and all the rest. My breaking point was reached several weeks ago, but this event at Madison Square Garden certainly put me over the top, Amber.
If I may follow up, I just want to start with your claim that he called Mexican migrants as people who have murder in their genes. The exact quote is, allowing people to come through an open border, 13,000 of which were murderers. Many of them murdered far more than one person, and they're now happily living in the United States. You know, now a murderer, I believe this, it's in their genes, and we got a lot of bad genes in our country right now. Nowhere in that quote does he talk specifically about Latinos. He's talking about murderers, Geraldo. And then on the question of this comedian doing this in a political setting, we also saw that George Lopez appeared on behalf of the Kamala Harris campaign and said that Mexicans are thieves. And then you had Jill Biden compare Latinos to breakfast tacos. So why is this particular remark so beyond the pale for you?
First of all, the remark about the genes. Let's take it in your sequence. So you gave me a multi-part question there. Let me take it one by one. If you don't read the plain language of that statement, then nothing I can say will convince you.
So it's a dog whistle.
Maybe you have to be a Latino to understand that when someone's talking about genetics and predisposition to murder and immigrants coming across the border from Mexico that they are talking about Hispanics. They are talking about Latinos. In terms of George Lopez and his humor, or the other person you mentioned, I forget the name. When the N-word jokes that are told by numerous black African-American comics are a category that is almost a separate part of comedy. Black people can use the N-word. White people cannot. We saw the fellow from Seinfeld who tried, he went around saying the word, prancing around. It destroyed his career. He was canceled because people take it so seriously. It is different. It is profoundly, substantively different when it is uttered, particularly in that venue with the Trump final rally. In the lead act, goes right to the gutter. You cannot seriously, with a straight face, tell me that you equate what happened in Madison Square Garden with George Lopez's nonsense. That is absolutely false. It is a misrepresentation, and it really strains my patience when I hear that question asked with a straight face.
Geraldo, you're a Boricua, you're a New Yorker. I was in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, before Donald Trump arrived, and threw the paper towels at the people of Puerto Rico in that stadium. We know that Puerto Rico's still suffering with power outages. There's mass displacement, and so many of the folks that suffered under Hurricane Maria ended up moving to places like Pennsylvania, and there's a growing diaspora there. I believe it's over 450,000 Puerto Rican diaspora voters are in Pennsylvania alone. Over 600,000 Latino voters are in Pennsylvania alone. Do you think that this is an October surprise? Is this going to play out at the polls? I mean, you've been reporting for years. I gather you have some sense of how this might play out electorally.
I covered Hurricane Maria personally. I greeted President Trump when he arrived at the airport. I was with him when he tossed the paper towels into that crowd. I applauded him for going to Puerto Rico because, as far as I know, President Obama only went to Puerto Rico one time, and that was for a fundraiser. So I applauded the fact that the President and First Lady went to Puerto Rico to at least give moral support. Then I saw the whole thing fall apart with a disorganization and the President's cavalier tossing of the paper towel, which was extremely unfortunate. But still, I applauded him for going. At least he showed up. You are absolutely right, though, when you point out that Puerto Rico is still suffering from Hurricane Maria, even though Hurricane Maria was
7 years ago.
5-6 years ago. It is, you could still see the blue tarps on top of so many roofs. And the electrical grid is so antiquated, they import the dirtiest diesel fuel from St. Croix, the refinery there. They bring it to Puerto Rico. They put it in the power plants. It's spewing all this pollution. And the frustration I have always had as a property owner in Puerto Rico for 14 years, I put in solar power. There's no solar power in Puerto Rico where the sun reliably shines 360 days out of 365 days a year. There's always sunshine. It's a beautiful place for solar power. And yet we still use this, the worst, cheapest, dirtiest fuel and the most inefficient system that breaks down. You don't need a hurricane. You don't need a tropical storm knocks the grid out in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico's infrastructure is pathetic. It definitely, desperately needs. I hope that regardless of what happens here, the Kamala Harris plan that I've seen outlines of starting yesterday morning, that at least is a sensible, pragmatic approach. I think Puerto Rico has to be a state. Puerto Rico, the statehood is long overdue. A state with the checks and balances and and rules and regulations and outside monitoring and a federal government oversight and all the rest. I think that Puerto Rico, that's the solution to the Puerto Rican problem ultimately. But in the meantime, at least Vice President Harris has presented something positive, something other than giving a comedian the opportunity to slander a race of people. Do you think that the Puerto Rican people will forget this floating island of garbage? I hope. You talk about the diaspora, and yes, Philadelphia is the second largest concentration of Puerto Ricans in the United States. I want these folks to vote, and they do vote, and I believe, here's my bold prediction, I believe that what happened in Madison Square Garden will be regarded historically as a turning point in this election. Maybe Trump was going to rout Kamala Harris. Maybe it was going to be neck to neck. Whatever it is, this event in Madison Square Garden will cause a movement that I believe will diminish President Trump's support and might even cost him this election.
Geraldo, I have to ask you, have you spoken to Donald Trump about this? And if not, what is the last conversation you had with him? How have you left things?
President Trump and I have been estranged since the 13th of December 2020 when he called me at home and wanted me, he was testing how I felt, this is 10 days after the election, how I felt about what had happened. And my impression when he called, he called several times to my home, but my impression when he called in November of 2020, my impression was that my whole attitude toward the president was one of consolation, too bad, one of sympathy, fight well fought. I thought that he was going to tell me, too bad, and I tried my best. Instead, he did say, and I reported on Fox that day, that I'm a reasonable man, and if that's the outcome, I will do the right thing. I assumed that meant that when the counting was over, and I thought it was already over, but even giving him a couple of more days here or there, that he would see the light, he lost, move on. And if he did go home after inaugural day, January 2021, and campaign for re-election, people would have flocked to his banner. Instead, he continued that big lie. The big lie, I called for his impeachment on January 7th of 2021, and I have not spoken to him since, and that's where we have left it. I have tremendously positive memories of my long friendship, Celebrity Apprentice and all the rest of it. It was exciting to see my buddy become president of the United States, but what he did after the election of 2020 was to stab the Constitution of the United States in the back. He refused to honor the peaceful succession of government that has been the hallmark of America's democracy. And, he does not, what his activities, and I don't know, he's made liars out of all the Republicans in this country who pretend to believe that the election of 2020 was stolen.
You've said that Latinos who still vote for Trump after this joke are people who lack self-respect. Do you think that message is going to appeal to them, or are you thinking that they're too far gone anyway, that there's no way you can win them over?
Well, I mean that's a fine question. I tell people how I feel. I've been around a long time. Been on television 54 years. I've marched in 50 Puerto Rican Day parades. I feel like I know every Puerto Rican personally. My dad was one of 17 children. I am telling the Puerto Rican people how I feel. I do not believe that the interests of Puerto Rico or Puerto Ricans are best served with the Donald Trump presidency. I want to give Kamala Harris a chance. She has not done it yet. She has not done the border yet. But I am fully hopeful. Let me put it that way. I am hopeful that she, in her new administration, will follow up on that plan that I saw yesterday, at least a way forward for an island that has languished. But I'll be damned if I will let anybody sit there in front of an international audience and insult my bloodline, my parents, my grandparents, my children. It was unforgivable. And in that venue, shame on everybody who had anything to do with scheduling that atrocity.
You've endorsed Kamala Harris, the vice president, and on the same day, I mean, the timing is almost Shakespearean. The same day that that comic made that remark, she had issued her plan for Puerto Rico, talking about rebuilding and clean energy and having tax credits and streamlining permitting and relief funds going directly to the people, not through bureaucracy, through the mayors, which I'm sure you know very well, gets very complicated on the island. You've endorsed Kamala Harris. Is this the plan that you're looking for? I mean, you also mentioned that Barack Obama, of course, only went for a fundraiser. She arrived in Puerto Rico last year after a storm, which hits quite often. So it seems like she does have interest. Is this plan enough? Is this what you want to see?
At least it is a beginning. At least there is a reasonably practical approach to endemic problems. It is something positive, offering a solution rather than just complaining. You talk about the mayors in Puerto Rico. Every municipality has a mayor. The mayor in Puerto Rico is like the chief executive. He is like the mini president. It's like Puerto Rico has 40 presidents. Nothing gets done. And much of what is invested is squandered in a way, and people go to jail, and it's dysfunctional, and even with good intentions, as many have good intentions, they tend to go nowhere because no one talks to each other. The two-party system in Puerto Rico is like the mainland now reflects the division. The division in Puerto Rico has existed long before the problems on the mainland. But it's not the plan that I envision, but I'll take any plan that is a professional, thought out. It seems to me, and particularly focusing on the electrical grid. If the federal government in D.C. promises just to do that, just fix the electricity in Puerto Rico so the people can live decent 21st century lives, I will be satisfied. I'll go on to my island in the sky and let people debate all the other issues they have. But I'd like something positive to happen to all these folks. We have a big reunion planned of my gigantic family this New Year's. I would love to see an attitude among Puerto Ricans of hopefulness that something's going to change, that improvement and modernity is headed toward Puerto Rico. That would be a great way to celebrate the new year.
Well, Geraldo, thank you so much for sharing your perspective.
Thank you.
Speaking out. I unfortunately don't think this issue is going to be wrapped anytime soon, but at least the election will. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you both.